Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to our buddy read of Mr. Scarborough's Family by Anthony Trollope. I am sitting here on the fainting couch reading a batch of chapters in a row. There's a batch of chapters that we're dealing with here that are basically wrapping up one whole scene in the novel, and I wanted to sort of read those all together and just get them done with. And I'll post them all today so that we can just move forward with this book. The scene in question involves Florence Mountjoy, the beloved intended of what Trollope calls the hero of our book, Harry Ainsley. Harry Ainsley's name has been blackened all throughout London by Augustus Scarborough in relation to Harry's dealings late at night, violent dealings, with Augustus's brother Scarborough, Mountjoy Scarborough. And Mountjoy Scarborough is a wastrel, he's a gambler, he's a bit of a lout. He has for a long time been intended to marry Florence Mountjoy by Florence's mother, Mama Mountjoy. Florence has never considered it. She's never agreed. She would never agree. She doesn't love Mountjoy Scarborough. But Mama Mountjoy has always thought Florence will marry her first cousin and become the Lady of Tretton Park, the wealthy property to which Mountjoy was the heir until the beginning of this book. Mama Mountjoy just doesn't want to let go of that idea. And to her, Harry Ainsley is therefore a dangerous interloper, someone who could upset long-standing plans. So she removes her daughter physically from England. They go to Brussels. They go to the embassy in Brussels. And they've been there for months now, where in addition to being removed from Harry Ainsley, Mama Mountjoy and Sir Magnus Mountjoy and Lady Mountjoy have conspired to put a number of suitors in Florence's way, hoping that they will woo her away from her devotion to Harry Ainsley. It isn't possible. We know that. Her devotion is not going anywhere. But they keep trying. And the last chapter we read, another suitor tries and fails. And as I mentioned at the time, that presents you, if you're a storyteller, with a fork in the road. Are you going to keep doing this? Or do you realize that this dramatic scene, this setting, has played itself out, and you now need to wrap it up? And Trollope, to his credit, realizes that he needs to wrap it up. And I thought we would read the string of chapters until we get to that, until we wrap that up. So I won't keep reading chapters. It's very tempting to just sit here and read Trollope on the couch all day out loud to you. But we're just going to do this chapter and then we'll be done. This will be today's batches of chapters. I'll do them separately because sooner or later, Joshua Crebo is going to stop vacationing elsewhere and make a playlist of these things. Anyway, this is chapter 47. Florence bids farewell to her lovers. Because, after all, when all is said and done, Trollope has made the right narrative decision here. Mama, had you not better take me back at once to Cheltenham? Has that unfortunate man written to you? Yes, the young man whom you call unfortunate has written. Of course, I cannot agree to have him so called. And to tell you the truth, I don't think he really is very unfortunate. He has got a girl who really loves him, and that, I think, is a step to happiness. Here Florence is talking about herself, and the unfortunate young man is Harry Ainsley, who has written to Florence to tell her that he's taking a job that will take him to America for years. And she wants to go back to Cheltenham to see him once before he goes. Or him to come to Brussels. But Florence would much prefer that they go back to England, especially since the whole purpose of going to Brussels was to get Florence away from Harry physically. Well, if he's going to America, then he's going to be away from her physically anyway, so that's not a big deal anymore. Every word of this was said by Florence as though with the purpose of provoking her mother, and so did Mrs. Mountjoy feel it. But behind this purpose there was that other fixed resolution to get Harry at last accepted as her husband, and perhaps means taken were the best. Mrs. Mountjoy was already beginning to feel that there would be nothing for her but to give up the battle, as Trollope's characters always do. Once they decide that nothing will stop a young woman from marrying, they eventually give up. Even Plantagenet Palliser eventually gives up. Everyone does. Mrs. Mountjoy was already beginning to feel that there would be nothing for her but to give up the battle, and to open her motherly arms to Harry Ainsley. Sir Magnus had told her that Mr. Grascor, that was the last suitor, would probably prevail. Mr. Grascor was said to be exactly the man likely to be effective with such a girl as Florence. That had been the last opinion expressed by Sir Magnus, but Mrs. Mountjoy found no comfort in it. Florence was going to have her own way. Her mother knew that it was so, and was very unhappy. but she was still anxious to continue a weak, ineffective battle. "It was very impertinent of him, writing," she said. "When he was going to America for years? Dear Mamma, do put yourself in my place. How is it possible that he should not write? He wrote to tell Florence that he's leaving the country. A young man has no business to come and insinuate himself into a family in that way, and then when he knows he is not welcome, to open correspondence. But, Mamma, he knows that he is welcome. If he had gone to America without writing to me, oh, that would have been impossible. I should have gone after him." "No, never. Not to America. I'm quite in earnest, Mamma. But it is no good talking about what could not have taken place. We ought to have prevented you from receiving or sending letters." Here Mrs. Mountjoy touched on a subject of which the practice of the English world had been much altered during the last 30 or 40 years. Perhaps we may say 50 or 60 years. 50 years ago, young ladies were certainly not allowed to receive letters as they chose, and to write them, and to demand that this practice should be carried on without any supervision from their elder friends. It is now usually the case that they do so. A young lady, before she falls into a correspondence with a young man, is expected to let it be understood that she does so. But she does not expect that her letters, either coming or going, shall be subject to any espial. And she generally feels that the option of obeying or disobeying the instructions given to her rests with herself. Practically, the use of the post office is in her own hands, and as this spirit of self-conduct has grown up, the morals and habits of our young ladies have certainly not deteriorated. In America, they carry latchkeys and walk about with young gentlemen as young gentlemen walk about with each other. In America, the young ladies are as well behaved as with us, as well behaved as they are in some continental countries in which they are still watched close by those they are given to as brides to husbands to whom they have hardly the means of becoming acquainted. Whether the latchkey system or that of free correspondence may not rob the flowers of some of that delicate aroma which we used to appreciate may be a question. It's not a question, Tony. Whether they are allowed to be independent people is not a question. Slavery has no aroma, Tony. Okay, if your horses could speak, they'd tell you that. But then it is also a question whether there does not come something in place of it which is in the long run to be found to be more valuable. Florence, when this remark was made as to her own power of sending and receiving letters, remained silent and looked very firm. She thought that it would have been difficult to silence her after this fashion. Not only because of the postal system, but also because of the help. We are told that the embassy help is all on her side, just as the help at her mother's house was all on her side. It would have been almost impossible. There's an extra irony here. This is Trollope getting all windy and, in my day. He does that sometimes, especially now. He's old. But there's also an irony here, because a large part of the reason why young women these days, if in England they don't go around with latchkeys in their pockets, imagine a woman having a key to her own home. But if they don't go that far, they can at least carry on correspondences without needing the permission of someone in the household. And the irony here is that a large part of the reason they can do that is because of Anthony Trollope, because of his day job working at the postal system. All for the better. So of course he has to defend himself. Right? In the middle here, he defends himself and says that we were told that letterboxes everywhere would create a deterioration of morals, but it hasn't happened. Our young ladies haven't deteriorated in morals. He's defending Florence just a bit, but he's defending himself as well. Sir Magnus could have done it at any rate if I had not been able. Sir Magnus could have done nothing, I think, which would not have been within your power. But it is useless talking of this. Will you not take me back to England so as to prevent the necessity of Harry coming here? Why should he come? Because, Mamma, I intend to see my future husband before he goes from me for so great a distance and for so long a time. Don't you feel any pity for me, Mamma? Do you feel any pity for me? Because one day you wish me to marry my cousin Scarborough, and the next Mr. Anderson, and the next Mr. Grascor? How can I pity you for that? It is all done because you have taken it in your head to think ill of one whom I believe to be especially worthy. You began by disliking him because he interfered with your plans about Mountjoy. I never would have married my cousin Mountjoy. He is not to my taste, and he is a gambler. But you have thought that you could do what you liked with me. It has always been for your own happiness. But I must be the judge of that. How could I be happy with any of these men, seeing that I do not care for them in the least? It would be utterly impossible for me to have myself married to either of them, To Harry Annesley I have given myself altogether, but you, because you are my mother, are able to keep us apart. Do you not pity me for the sorrow and trouble which I must suffer? I suppose a mother always pities the sufferings of a child, and removes them when she can do so. But now, Mamma, is he to come here, or will you take me back to England? This was a question which Mrs. Mountjoy found it very difficult to answer. On the spur of the moment she could not answer it, as it would be necessary that she should first consult Sir Magnus. Could Sir Magnus undertake to confine her daughter within the precincts of the embassy, and exclude the lover during such times as Harry Annesley might remain in Brussels? As she thought of the matter in her own room, she conceived that there would be great difficulty in the matter. All the world of Brussels would become aware of what was going on. The young lady would endeavour to get out, and could only be constrained by the cooperation of the servants. The young gentleman, in his endeavours to get in, could only be prevented by the assistance of the police. Dim ideas presented themselves to her mind of further travel. Maybe we don't go back to England, can't stay here. Maybe we go elsewhere. Maybe we run from Harry Annesley. But wherever she went, there would be the post office, and she was aware that the young man could pursue her much quicker than she could fly. How good it would be that in such an emergency she might have the privilege of locking her daughter up in some convent. And yet it must be a Protestant convent, as all things savouring of the Roman Catholic religion were abhorrent to her. Altogether, as she thought of her own condition and that of her daughter, she felt that the world was sadly out of joint. Again, we're trying to like Mama Mountjoy, but if you think the world is out of joint because you can't lock your daughter up in a dungeon, something wrong with you. Coming here, is he? Said Sir Magnus. Then he will just have to go back again, as wise as he came. But can you shut the door against him? Shut my doors? Of course I can. He'll never be able to get his nose in here if once an order has been given for his exclusion. Who's Mr. Annesley? I suppose he knows an Englishman in Brussels. But she will go out to meet him. What? In the streets? Said Sir Magnus, in horror. I fear she would. By George, she must be a stiff-necked one if she'll do that. Then Mrs. Mountjoy, with tears in her eyes, began to explain with very many epithets that her daughter was the best girl in all the world. She was entirely worthy of confidence. Those who knew her were aware that no better-behaved young woman could exist. She was very conscientious, religious, and high-principled. But she'll go out in the street and walk with a young man when all her friends told her not to. Is that her idea of religion? Then Mrs. Mountjoy, with some touch of anger in her tone of her voice, said that she would return to England and carry her daughter with her. She does not like even Sir Magnus belittling her daughter. What the deuce can I do, Sarah, when the young lady is so unruly? I can give orders to have him shut out, and can take care that they are obeyed, but I cannot give orders to have her shut in. I should be making her a prisoner, and everybody would talk about it. In that matter, you must give her the orders. Only you may say that she is not to comply with them. Only you say she won't comply with them. On the following day, Mrs. Mountjoy informed her daughter that they would go back to Cheltenham. She did not name an immediate day, because it would be well, she thought, to stave off the evil hour. Nor did she name a distant day, because were she to do so, the terrible evil of Harry Annesley's arrival in Brussels would not be prevented. At first she wished to name no day, thinking it would be a good thing to cross Harry on the road. But here Florence was too strong for her, and at last a day was fixed. In a week's time they would take their departure and go home by slow stages. With this arrangement, Florence expressed herself well pleased, and of course made Harry acquainted with the probable time of their arrival. So she writes him another letter. It's not a love letter. They're still obeying the technicalities. It's just a business letter. I need you to know when I will be in England. Here are my train tables. Mr. Grascor, when he heard that the day had been suddenly fixed for the departure of Mrs. Mountjoy and her daughter, was not unnaturally conceived that he himself was the cause of the lady's departure. Nor did he on account resign all hope. The young lady's mother was certainly on his side, and he thought it quite possible that were he to appear in England he might be successful. But when he had heard of her coming departure, of course it was necessary that he should say some special farewell. He dined one evening at the British Embassy, and took an opportunity during the evening of finding himself alone with Florence. "And so, Miss Florence," he said, "you and your estimable mamma are about to return to England." "We have been here a very long time, and are going home at last." Florence does not make mention here that she has not given him permission to call her by name. And he's raised the prospect of chasing her to England. "It seems to me that but the other day when you came," said Mr. Grascor, with all a lover's eagerness. "It was in autumn, and the weather was quite mild and soft. Now we're in the middle of January." "I suppose so, but still the time has gone only too rapidly. but the heart can hardly take account of days and weeks. As this was decided lovers' talk, and was made in terms which even a young lady cannot pretend to misunderstand, Florence was obliged to answer it in the same manner, equally direct. And now she was angry with him. She had informed him that she was in love with another man. In doing so, she had done much more than the necessity of the case demanded, and had told him, as the best way of silencing him, that which she might have expected to keep to her own secret. In other words, all she really should have needed to do was tell him that she's not interested. She didn't need to explain herself. But she did explain herself, and here he is still pitching woo. She made him no immediate answer, but frowned at him and looked stern. It was clear to her intelligence that he had no right to talk to her about his heart after the information she had given him. "I hope, Miss Mountjoy, that I may look forward to the pleasure of seeing you when I go over to England." "But we don't live in London, or near it. We live down in the country, in Cheltenham." "Distance would be nothing." This was very bad, and must be stopped, thought Florence. "I suppose I shall be married by that time. I don't know where we will live, but I shall be very happy to see you if you call." She had here made a bold assertion, and one which Mr. Grascor did not at all believe. He was speaking of a visit which he might make perhaps in a month or 6 weeks, and the lady told him that he would find her married. And yet, as he knew very well, her mother and uncle and her aunt were all opposed to this marriage, and she spoke of it without a blush, without any reticence. Young ladies were much emancipated, but he did not think that they were generally carried their emancipation so far as this. "I hope not that," he said. "I don't know why you would be so ill-natured as to hope it. In fact, Mr. Grascor, you don't believe what I told you the other day. Perhaps as a young lady I ought not to have alluded to it, but I did so in order to set the matter at rest altogether. Of course I can't tell you when you may come. If you come quite at once, I shall not be married." "No, not married. But I shall be as much engaged as it is possible for a girl to be. I have given my word, and nothing will make me false to it. I don't suppose you will come on my account." "Solely on your account." "Then stay at home. I am quite in earnest, and now I must say good-bye." She departed, and left him seated alone on the sofa. He at first told himself that she was unfeminine. There was a hard way with her of talking about herself, which he almost pronounced to be unladylike. An unmarried girl should, he thought, under no circumstances speak of the gentleman to whom her affections had been given, as Miss Mountjoy spoke of Mr. Annesley. But nevertheless, he would sooner possess her as his own wife than any other girl he had ever met. Something of the real passion of unsatisfied love made him chill at his heart. Who was this Harry Annesley for whom she professed so warm a feeling? Her mother declared Harry Annesley to be a scapegrace, and something of the story of a discreditable midnight street quarrel between him and the young lady's cousin had reached his ears. He did not suppose it to be possible that the young lady could actually get married without her mother's cooperation, and therefore he thought that he would still go to England. In one respect he was altogether untouched. If he could ultimately succeed in marrying the young lady, she would not be a bit worse as his wife because she had been attached to Harry Annesley. That was the kind of folly which a girl could very quickly get over when she had not been allowed to have her own way. Therefore, upon the whole, he thought he would go to England. Even in the 1880s, can you imagine still thinking that you will marry a young woman who's spoken to you this way? The only way you can think it is if it does not matter at all what she thinks, if she's not a person. What you are doing here is breaking a high-spirited horse. That's the only way you can think. You still think of this now. But the parting with Anderson had also to be endured and must necessarily be more difficult. She owed him a debt for having abstained, and she could not go without paying the debt by some expression of gratitude. The abstinence in question here is that she asked Mr. Anderson to no longer pitch woo to her. "As a gentleman, I ask for your promise," and he gave it, and he stuck to it. That she would have done so had he kept aloof was a matter of course, but equally a matter of course was it that he would not keep aloof. "I shall want to see you for just 5 minutes tomorrow morning before you take your departure," he said in a lugubrious voice during her last evening. He had kept his promise to the very letter, mooning about in his desolate manner very conspicuously. The desolation had been notorious and very painful to Florence, but the promise had been kept, and she was grateful. "Oh, certainly, if you wish it," she said. "I do wish it," said he, an appointment, as she promised. This was in the ballroom, a huge chamber, very convenient for its intended purpose, and always handsome at night, but looking as desolate in the morning as did poor Anderson himself. He was stalking up and down the long room when she entered it, and being at the further end, stalked up to her and addressed her with words which he had chosen for that purpose. Miss Mountjoy, he said, you have found me here an unhappy, light-hearted young man. I hope I leave you soon to be in the same, in spite of this little accident. So let's go over that again. He says, Miss Mountjoy, he said, you found me here a happy, light-hearted young man. Not meaning found you in the ballroom, but found you when you got to Brussels. When we met, I was a light-hearted, happy young man. I hope to leave you soon to be the same in spite of this little accident. He did not say that he was a blighted being, because the word had, he thought, become ridiculous, but he would have used it had he dared, as expressing most accurately his condition. A cloud has passed over me, and its darkness will never be effaced. It will certainly be your doing. Oh, Mr. Anderson, what can I say? I have loved before, but never like this. And so you will again. Never. When I declare that, I expect my word to be respected. He paused for an answer, but what could she say? She did not at all respect his word on the subject, and she did not respect his conduct. Yes, I call upon you to believe me when I say that for me, all that is over, but it can be nothing to you. It shall be very much to me. I shall go on in the same disconsolate, miserable way. I suppose I shall stay here, because I shall be as well here as anywhere else. I might move to Lisbon, but what good would that do me? Your image would follow me to whatever capital I might direct my steps. But there is one thing you can do. And here he brightened, putting on quite an altered face. Notice that he's such a shallow fop that even when he thinks about wandering or it's desolate, as lonely as a cloud, it's only to capitals. It's only the places that have embassies and nightlife and gambling tables and horses in the afternoon and whatnot. He's not going to go to a little town, please. but other capitals, whatever capital he goes to. I will do anything, Mr. Anderson, in my power. If you should change. I shall never change, she said with an angry look. And who's to blame? How many times did you have to say this? If you should change, I think you should remember the promise you exacted and the fidelity with which it has been kept. I do remember it. And then I should be allowed to come again and have my chance. Whatever I may be at the court of the Shah of Persia or at the Chinese capital, I will instantly come. I promise you when you asked for me. Will you now promise me? I cannot promise anything so impossible. It will bind you to nothing but to let me know that Mr. Harry Annesley has gone his way. But she had to explain to him that it was impossible that she should make any promise founded on the idea that Mr. Harry Annesley should ever go in a way which she would not accompany him. With that he had to be as well satisfied as the circumstances of the case would admit, and he left her with the assurance not intended to be quite audible that he was and ever should be a blighted individual. He resisted the urge to use the word blighted, but he can't quite not say it. He just mumbles it. When the carriage was at the door, Sir Magnus came down into the hall full of smiles and good humour, but at the moment Lady Mountjoy was saying a last word of farewell to her relatives in her own chamber. Goodbye, my dear. I hope you will get well through all your troubles. This was addressed to Mrs. Mountjoy. And as for you, my dear, she said, turning to Florence, if you would only contrive to be a little less stiff-necked, I think the world would go easier with you. I think my stiff neck, aunt, as you call it, is what I have chiefly to depend upon. I mean in reference to other advice than mamma's. Goodbye, aunt. It's very 1880s, but that's a zinger. Goodbye, Florence. And the two parted, hating each other as only female enemies can hate. But Florence, when she was in the carriage, threw herself on her mother's neck and kissed her. All right, so there we go. Florence has gotten her way. She's going back to England in order to see Harry Annesley. Now, under the circumstances as they are described here, she's going back for a long period of sadness. She's going back to England in order to see Harry before he leaves the country for 3 years. But at least she's no longer in Brussels having one young man after another thrown at her face. At least that is no longer true. At least she's not at the embassy constantly dealing with the open aggression of Lady Mountjoy. At least that's not true. At least there's no more talk or thought of locking her up, of locking her in a dungeon. That is no longer true. She and her mother are on their way back to England. And it's not going to be the way Mama Montjoy wanted, where they're making their way back to England by such slow stages that they might miss Harry Annesley anyway. She has made her mother give a date. And she has told Harry that date. All right. That whole digression, that whole decamping to Brussels is now over. That's why I read these chapters all at once, because that whole part of the book is now over. And Florence Montjoy is about to re-enter the central cast of characters in a central location. So I'll wrap this up. I will resist the urge to keep reading Trollope chapters to you all of a Sunday morning. I'll talk about a wonderful way to spend a Sunday morning, but we'll do 3 chapters today and then we'll move on. So I will see you next time. Thank you.